Hi there and welcome from Ventura, California to today's webinar, Conquest Case Study, How Performance Toyota Increased New Vehicle Gross Profits and Sales, sponsored by vAuto and hosted by WebAttract, the leader in thought leadership webinars. I'm Lori Dearman, Senior Webinar Producer with WebAttract, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. And in just a moment, we'll be introducing our featured presenters as today's webinar is about learning from them how to increase new vehicle gross profits and sales. You'll also have an opportunity to have your questions answered at the end of the presentation during the Ask the Experts panel session with both of our panelists. Now, we've invited you along with a diverse audience of over 600 professionals registered from 44 states and provinces. Now, before today's webinar, we asked each of you to tell us a bit about what you'd like to learn, and many of you weighed in. Thank you for your input, and I think you'll find that our speakers will address many of your requests throughout the program today. I'd like to go to our first interactive poll for today, and we'd like to hear from each of you on the following question. How would you rate your knowledge of competitors' new vehicle pricing? Do you feel that it's excellent, very good, good, or perhaps needs improvement? All right, looks like we've got 8% of you weighing in at excellent. 33% saying very good, 29% saying good, and 30% saying needs improvement. So really we're covering the spectrum here. And with that, I would like to go to our first speaker. Joining us today, we have Dale Pollock, vAuto founder. And it is a pleasure to have you here today, Dale. Welcome to the webinar.
Thank you very much, Lori, and happy holidays to everyone. And I just want to say on behalf of the entire vAuto team here, thank you all very much for your business these past years, and we promise to remain committed to doing everything in our power to help you all maintain your competitive edge and be as profitable as possible. So again, thank you all very much. I would also like to thank our dealer today who's going to join us shortly, Jim Blickel. I think all of you will be really impressed and fascinated by his story and the way that he has found success in his used vehicle department. It's really inspirational what he's done, and we'll hear from him very shortly. I'd just like to make a few preliminary comments about the state of the new car market. I mean, it's probably no secret to anyone that it's a really, really brutal market, you know, very difficult to make money. You know, the common perception shared among many is that there's just no money to be made in used cars. You know, and there's actually some pretty disturbing facts that support those perceptions and perhaps that reality if it happens to be the case at your dealership. You know, what we have to recognize is happening in both the new and the used car market is a high degree of margin compression. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of the internet. That's what the internet does to every single business in the entire world that it touches. It creates more transparency, more perfect knowledge among buyers and sellers, which is going to have the inevitable consequence of reducing margins. But, you know, what has it done specifically in the new car market? Well, since 2009 through 2013, it's actually reduced profits by 31%. I mean, it's a pretty significant number. And what has happened, if you look at these numbers, is that in 2009, the average transaction price was about $26,000 versus today, it's about $29,600, about $3,600 higher, the average transaction price of a new car. And the average gross profit, front-end gross profit, has gone from $939 to $734. So essentially what happened, it went in 2009 from a 3.6% margin to in 2013 a 2.5% margin, or an overall reduction of 31%. That's really significant, and that's really painful without question. So, you know, no secret, no big surprise that this is why, you know, the perception persists that there's little, if any, money to be made in the new car department. And I want to tell you that as Jim Blickel and other really bright, innovative dealers are proving to us every day around the country, that does not have to be the case. It absolutely does not have to be the case. And if it is the case, you know, it's just simply a matter of us not being willing to do something different. And, you know, we've demonstrated together, this provision and velocity community of dealers, that there actually is quite a bit of money to be made in the used car department. But if we continue to do business the same way we had always done it, we wouldn't be enjoying the profitability that we have in used cars. And I submit to you, and guys like Jim Blickel and others are living testaments to this fact, that you can make money, and some very respectable money in the new car department, but it's going to require us to do some things differently. And, and there really is the rub, because, for us to learn, new disciplines, new things to do, doesn't come easy. But if, in fact, we're not willing to do those things, then we shouldn't expect it to improve. If we are willing to do it, with the advent of new tools like Conquest, and I suspect others that will come along eventually, we can do differently. So what is it that we're going to have to do different? Well, basically and quickly, what I'd like to do is just touch on three things. Number one, you all know that you can make money on new cars when you have the right car. And I understand, that we all think that we know what is the right car, and I'm also pretty sure to a certain extent we do know what the right car is. But I want to tell you what I've discovered and other dealers using Conquest have found is that there's a lot of nuance of what's moving and what's not. And very often, very small differences in color or trim or price point or a specific piece of information, or excuse me, a specific piece of equipment often makes a very different market day supply of a new vehicle. And when you have the right vehicles, i.e., low market day supply, high demand, short supply, those are the cars that you can, in fact, get really good gross profits on. Now, I also understand that these cars are often very difficult to get from the factory. They hold those cars, and they dole them out very sparingly. But as we have come to understand that with better knowledge, you can negotiate for those vehicles in your order relationship with your manufacturers more effectively, and with our latest release of Conquest, which we'll touch on a little bit later, you can actually have superior knowledge relative to other dealers in your market to help you acquire some of those vehicles from your fellow dealers with their lack of understanding of what's going on. So having the right cars in stock is the first critical discipline to making money in new cars, and there is opportunity for improvement. But we're going to have to adopt new tools, we're going to have to adopt new disciplines or learn new disciplines, and we're going to have to be, legitimately committed to the fact of making stocking a bit more of a science than we've made it in the past. But suffice it to say, when you do it, that's the first step to actually making decent money in new cars. And then the second step, and again, one that's very difficult for many dealers to get their heads around, just as it was 10 years or so ago in the used car business, and that is that consumers today will absolutely respond. They will respond and reward you for vehicles that are priced properly, fairly. And that doesn't mean all low. New vehicles with low market day supply, you can get away with pricing high. And vehicles with low market day supply, you really need to price aggressively. But suffice it to say, when the vehicles are priced properly, fairly, legitimately relative to their market day supply, you get rewarded by more shoppers at a lower cost of acquiring those sales and those opportunities. But, historically in the new car department, if we've advertised new car prices at all, generally we've either done one of two things. We've listed them at MSRP, or we've listed them at some sort of legitimate big-time loser just to draw people. And in fact, neither one of those strategies really works very well in your interest. One doesn't bring too many people to the showroom, and the other one just creates a nightmare when they do get to your showroom. So guys like Jim Blickel, who we're going to hear from, and others are proving to us every day, we can see it in the numbers, that when you are willing, if you're willing to actually put a legitimate fair market price on every vehicle, you will see more traffic than you're seeing today and acquire those people at a lower cost. And then the third thing that we're must learn to do is to really, in our showrooms, take advantage of the fact that these people who are coming to our showroom are actually coming more prepared to transact at our list price, or at our asking price than they were in the past, and that provides us an opportunity for a lot of efficiencies. When people come more prepared to transact at the price that drew them into the dealership, that means that we can close deals faster, we can satisfy more customers, we can do it with sales professionals in our showrooms that are easier to hire, easier to manage, and more efficient to pay. And what we are going to learn to do, all of us, just as we've learned to do in the used car business, is replace negotiation with documentation. which should not be a problem if our vehicles are priced right and if we have sufficient tools to do that. So is there money to be made in new cars? You bet. And we're going to hear from Jim Blickel here in just a moment, who will testify to that fact. But he's not the only one. But the common thread that runs through all these dealers that are making money in the new car department who previously were not is that they were willing to do something different. So I leave you for now with the basic challenge of thought, and that is, are you satisfied with the current status quo of the profitability of your new car department? And if you're not, are you willing to do something different? And on that point, I'm going to turn it back to Lori so that she can introduce Jim. Thanks, Lori.
Thank you so much, Dale, and of course we'll have you back at the end to help answer some of the questions that are coming in. Okay, speaking next for us, we have Jim Blickel, Dealer Principal at Performance Toyota in Sinking Spring, Pennsylvania. It's a pleasure to have you with us here, Jim. How are you today?
Great. Thanks, Lori. It's nice to be here.
All right, and maybe you could get us started then by telling us a little bit about you and how you became a dealer.
Sure. I grew up around the car business. Performance Toyota was founded by my father in 1969. At the time, he was the biggest seller of garage keepers and liability insurance to the local dealer community, and he was able to purchase the local Toyota franchise from one of his clients that was retiring. Thankfully, he ignored most of the advice that he received then regarding Toyota. I grew up working in the dealership. I washed windows, recon cars. I worked in the parts department. Frankly, I really didn't like it at all. I wanted to do my own thing, so I became a mechanical engineer, got a job working for IBM. I built printed circuit boards for personal computers in the early 80s. Once I'd been there a few years, I realized I could make it on my own. I thought it might be time to give the family business a try. First, I went back to school and got an MBA. Fortunately, my dad passed away in 1997, and I've been the dealer since then. I do think it's important to note that I've never really felt like a car guy, even though I've been doing this for 30-some plus years. I'm definitely way more engineer than salesman. I enjoy running my own business, but I never really enjoyed the car business. Not a big fan of the negotiating and the lack of trust between us and the customers. I was always keenly aware of the difference between our Joe Verdi ask for the MSRP model and how I did business with family and friends, which had very little or no negotiating at all.
Would you perhaps share a little bit about your dealership and its market?
Sure. We're in Sinking Spring, Pennsylvania. It's a suburb of Reading. It's us on the Monopoly board, so most of you have heard of us. We're a little over an hour's drive from Philadelphia, far enough away that we're not part of the Philly market. Reading was a typical northeastern industrial town, but the city's been hit harder than most. In 2011, the city of Reading had the highest level of poverty of any city in the country. We edged out Camden, New Jersey, and Flint, Michigan for those honors. We've dropped or risen, depending on your perspective, to 4th or 5th place in the last couple of years. It's not all bad news, though. The county, which has a little over 400,000 inhabitants, is doing pretty well. We never really boomed, so our bust wasn't too big either.
And could you give us a quick overview of your sales and profit numbers?
Sure. In terms of volume, on new Toyotas, we went from 1,013 in 2013, and we're tracking for 1,273 for this year. It's a 25% increase. Average gross numbers have gone from 946 on the front end last year to 1197 this year, and incidentally, that puts us about $300 over the regional average for the Toyota region here. Sizable increases in both volume and average gross have led to a pretty dramatic increase in total gross profit for the year, from $1.7 million last year to being on track for 2.6 this year.
Wow, nice. And how is it that you got involved with vAuto?
It was February 2011. We hit rock bottom on used car sales. I think we sold 19 that month. We'd been averaging around 35 versus around 75 new at the time. Not very good, but actually pretty typical for a Toyota dealer back then. I'd been after my used car manager to bring the business into the current century, but he thought the internet was the enemy. He was convinced the classified section of the paper was all that mattered, so his 19 units in February was his last month. I took over for him and jumped onto vAuto. For the next 6 months, I priced the cars myself. By June, my 4th month in, we sold 87. In July, we hit the 100 mark for the first time and have been averaging that ever since. Our average gross did drop about $250, but we more than doubled, nearly tripled our volume. By the end of the summer, I trained one of my sales managers to be the used car manager. He was actually the guy with the least amount of used car experience on my staff, but he was by far the most analytical, and he's been doing the job ever since. As a management team back then, we discussed how dramatic the difference between new and used cars was. We were loving the experience that used car customers were getting it. The customers were loving it. For the first time in my career, I was actually enjoying the business. But as much fun as we were having with used, we were in the same old rut with new cars. So we spent a number of meetings trying to figure out how we could possibly replicate our used car success. Again, we were just loving the difference in the showroom with the used car customer at that time.
And what were some of the things that you did in new vehicles to get out of that rut?
In late 2011, we were about to open our new showroom. We just completed Toyota's image program, and I thought if we were going to try something different, that this was the time. I did a lot of reading about the industry, and I was convinced that even though I didn't know there was a name for it at the time, it's a limited negotiation model, but I was convinced that that would be a better way for us. So we threw out our old Verdi books, and we discounted every vehicle in stock. At that time, I wrote my own formula for pricing cars. It's originally derived mostly just from the day's supply, and it was on an Excel spreadsheet. And basically, the higher the day's supply on a model, the bigger the discount was. At that time, I got a lot of resistance from my general sales manager. He's my ex-general sales manager. He had been with me for 19 years, but he thought this was a big mistake. So he was the second casualty of my new vision. At that time, we adopted an internal model of fast, fun, and transparent, and that's what we were striving for, and that's what we started training our salespeople for. And it was evident pretty quickly that we were going in the right direction. The entire demeanor of the showroom was changing. It was much more relaxed, a lot less confrontational. The sales force was loving it. Customers and managers were loving it, but there were a couple of issues at the time. One, our average gross was down, and pretty significantly on some models. Secondly, my spreadsheet was a beast. It took me an entire day to reprice inventory. I was trying to do that once every 10 days. And I also knew that my day supply formula didn't take market conditions or competitive pricing into account. I tried to do some mystery shopping, but it was really inefficient. And the spreadsheet was really cumbersome for my desk managers to use as well. They had to take the particular model they were on and then actually do a calculation to come up with the discounted price for each individual car. So it was not efficient at the desk. I was committed to the model, but we had a lot of work to do. So the next change was a pay plan change, lowered the commission for salespeople and instituted a $50 bonus for deals done at JSRP. The salespeople began referring to my discounted prices as Jim's suggested retail price, so JSRP is stuck around here. Next, we started tracking the percent of deals that we were actually doing at that discounted price, and we started tracking the average discount given by both salesperson and by model. The model information I eventually used in a new improved version of my pricing formula. And this all started to help, and our average grosses were coming back up, but slowly. And then about that time, I heard that vAuto was releasing a new car version of its software. And if I'm right, I think, Lori, that we're going to go to another audience poll question. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. And folks, go ahead and weigh in. Coming up on your screen is that next poll. And the question is, if you price your new vehicles below MSRP, would you expect your grosses to increase, stay the same, or decrease? Okay, looks like our audience is weighing in with 35% saying increase, 43% feel that it would stay the same, and 22% saying decrease. So interesting spread there. And Jim, any thoughts or comments on these results?
Yeah, I was certainly hoping for an increase. I wasn't certain about it, but I do feel I'm certain now that it can be done. Just a little history on me with Conquest. I went to NAD in New Orleans last year. A, I love New Orleans, and B, I wanted to see Conquest, and I wanted to sign up early. So it was installed, I think it was late in March here. And in the right away, I was just inundated with data, and the engineer in me was loving it. I had more than my day's supply to work with. I had competitors' online pricing. I had the market day supply by model. I had Kelley Blue Book's fair pricing guides. all at my fingertips to work with. So what I found pretty quickly was comparing my pricing with my old model to Kelley Blue Book fair market pricing. There were a number of opportunities to increase prices. My model, there was definitely some fear involved in pricing the cars because they didn't have as much of this information. I didn't want to be pricing myself out of the market, so I was too low on a lot of them. Not necessarily core models like Camry LEs and Corollas, but on either a more loaded version of a Camry or a lot of our SUVs and trucks. And it gave me the ammo to raise the prices and be confident that I wasn't pricing myself out of the market. Next step was we put hang tags on every car with a new discounted price, and we began an effort to explain the pricing philosophy up front to the customer, just as we had learned to do with used cars. And by June, it was starting to really click. Grosses had rebounded to pre-recession levels. We've set monthly volume and net records for 6 straight months. And maybe the best part of all is we're routinely hearing customers saying that it's the best experience they've ever had buying a car. And the nice thing is they don't seem to mind writing online reviews to that effect.
And how did Conquest help you with desking?
Well, first of all, now my managers have discounted prices by stock number, as well as the list price, the invoice, the KBB fair market price, all there at the touch of a button. So they have quick access to everything they need to desk the deal and close it. My GSM says that the single most valuable thing might be the use of the bottom price in Conquest. And in the same screen where I plug in pricing rules, I can also plug in the lowest acceptable price out that we'll take. Our old Verdi model of doing business was to try to avoid price, protect the gross, but competition in the Toyota world and all worlds is tough. So in order to save deals, we eventually adopted a philosophy that if we couldn't close them, they left it invoice minus holdback, fearful that they were heading to the next dealer that was going to beat our deal. And that was great for making deals, but it wasn't really good for making money. I've seen countless studies since I've been in the business that price was not the most important thing to customers when they went shopping for a car. It's not that I didn't believe the studies, I just didn't really know what to do with that information. And what we've now found is if we do a really good job of explaining the process and have the prices where they belong, that when we say no, we can't go any lower, and we show the ammunition to the customers, that they generally say okay, they'll take it. So our new pricing and philosophy has led to a 10% increase in our closing ratio year after year. Now, I set a bottom price, but my managers are allowed to go below it. They just have to have a good reason. It's either a great trade, good F&I profits, repeat or local customer, and of course we'll still match a deal when we have to. I really believe, though, that a good portion of our increase in average gross profit comes from not having a slew of negative deals every month.
And how about in terms of helping you get the right car? How does Conquest help with that?
Well, with Toyota, we don't get to actually order cars. We put in our preference of what we'd like to get. So we've used Conquest to help figure out which cars should be highest on that list of preferences. Additionally, there's a lot of dealer trading in the Toyota community. So previously, if someone wanted one of our Camrys, we took a Camry back. Now my dealer trader references Conquest, and we look for the highest action number in the stocking actions section, and she uses that information now, so we don't just take a light car back, we take what's moving the best. Incidentally, I just got our first look last week at Conquest 2.0, and I'm not that familiar with it, but it looks like an improvement, and it'll definitely make it easier for my dealer trader to do that in the future.
And in terms of challenges, are there any that you would associate with Conquest?
While we're on inventory, the challenge there is that Conquest only sees what's on the ground, so it doesn't show what's allocated and inbound to us. So I could be light on RAV4s at the moment, but have a couple of truckloads about to hit in a day or two. Conquest won't pick those up. That's not ideal, but frankly, I don't have a solution to that problem, and it's still better than what we were doing before. Other challenges, we made really great strides with this whole new process, this whole new philosophy, but we're not doing a great job marketing it yet. So that's on the top of our list for 2015. We could also do a better job of training. you know, when we initially trained everybody to do this, everybody was really, really good at it, and we just need to refocus again to make sure that 100% of our customers are hearing this message. We're currently selling almost 70% of our new and used vehicles at the discounted price, JSRP, and the average discount's at about $210. I'd like to see us get those numbers to 80%, buying at the discounted price, and get our discount down to about $150 this upcoming year. Lastly, competition is responding. Just in the spring when we first got on this, the majority of my competition had their cars listed online at MSRP. Now at least half are showing discounted prices. There are some that are ridiculously low, but it's not bothering me. At one of vAuto's seminars in Chicago a few months ago, I think I heard Dale say that I shouldn't be worried if I'm being copied. I should only worry if we're not.
Very good advice. Jim, I have just one more question here for you. Given your experience with Conquest, what best practices or any suggestions that you have to offer other dealers considering the system?
Well, as Dale said, I think it's pretty obvious we've entered an era of greater transparency. My feeling is it's better to be out in front of that than lagging behind. It was not an easy change for us to make. There are a couple of people that didn't make it with me. It certainly would have been a lot easier for me to do it with Conquest than my own pricing model early on. We could have avoided some of that loss of gross in the beginning. As to best practices, I make quick checks on our prices daily right now. It's quick or easy. And then 2 or 3 times a month I pull up the entire inventory for a more thorough analysis. You click a button and you can download the entire inventory into Microsoft Excel. And then I spend about an hour or 2 working with that spreadsheet. I get rid of a few columns. I create some columns like the difference between my discounted price and the KBB price. I add the gross, the discount, what % over invoice I am. And then I take a few minutes and just kind of absorb the data, looking for vehicles that need to either go up or down. In addition, you'll get if you have any, Conquest will alert you that your prices are above Kelley Blue Book. So, for instance, yesterday I noticed that 2015 Camry LEs were slightly over the KBB number. The KBB number actually had come down a little bit over the weekend. So I got that alert. So as I reviewed the data to see how much to lower the LEs, I noticed that I actually had room to move the Camry SEs and the XEs up. So they went up. And I also saw at that time room to move Tacomas, Tundras, and 4Runners up. It's pretty typical that for every price I lower, there's 2 or 3 that I'm moving in the other direction. That's it, Lori. I think it's back to you.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jim. And we're going to have you back in just a few moments to start answering the questions coming in. But, folks, I did want to go to our third and final poll for today. If you wouldn't mind weighing in, we'd like to hear from you. From your new vehicle sales, what's the average discount off your listing price? So is it greater than $1,000, maybe between $750 and $1,000, $500 and $750, less than $500, or perhaps you don't track discounts? Okay, looks like the majority of us coming in, 30% of us saying greater than $1,000, 22% saying in that $750 to $1,000 range, 11% saying $500 to $750 range, 19% saying less than $500, and 18% don't actually track discounts. So there you have it. For anybody who would like to continue the conversation, learn a little bit more, we do have some resources here on the screen for you. Certainly, you're invited to go out to vAuto.com. There's lots of great dealer resources there. Also invite you to visit DalePollock.com. This is where you can access Dale's blog and read a bit more about his philosophy on what's going on in the market. Also, certainly invite you to contact your performance manager, and if you don't have the name and contact information handy, you can find the name and contact information on the bottom right side of your vAuto dashboard. So go out there and take a look, certainly. Look forward to hearing from all of you. At this point, I'd like to ask Jim and Dale to step back to the virtual podium, and I'm going to go ahead to our first question. I'm going to go ahead and start with Dale. And Dale, Michael's asking, what if our competitors stack rebates, giving an unrealistic low internet price?
Yeah, great question. You know, it's unfortunate but true that liars will always screw up a market. And, you know, I hate to be blunt about it, but, you know, when you stack every possible conceivable rebate that no one will ever qualify for all of them, you know, it's a lie. And it's unfortunate that it happens, but it surely happens. And you want to know what the good news is? The good news is that as ever greater transparency creeps into the new car pricing market, it will be ever more difficult for dealers to pull that stunt. So, yeah, does it happen today? Yes, but, you know, you can be sure that over time it's going to get more difficult and less common because it'd be too easy for consumers to know otherwise. But more specifically, Michael, I think it's generally true that when dealers do that unethical practice of stacking rebates, they typically do it sort of in a display format on a particular car or a couple cars, sort of like a you know, giant loss leader representative of all of the makes or models that they have of that type. But I think where you don't see that game played as much, if at all, is in classified listings. So, you know, it would take too much work for somebody, quite frankly, to take every single vehicle they have in stock and price it with every possible rebate that's available. They generally won't go to that much effort, fortunately. So I think that in the medium in which I think Conquest presents great value, and that is pricing all of your cars every day at a fair market price in a classified format, I think that you're less apt to be challenged by dealers who use that sort of unethical practice.
Okay, this one over to you, Jim. Tony's asking, what steps do you use to find the sweet spot for pricing your new vehicles using Conquest?
Well, it's still a little bit of a work in process, but I think I'm getting pretty dialed in. So first, it's important to know that in Conquest, you can price your vehicles a number of different ways. You can set it to automatically be either a percent over or below invoice. You can set it a dollar amount above or below, dollar amount below MSRP, percent below. You could be a dollar amount below Kelley Blue Book. I happen to be using a percent over invoice right now. So I start there. That percent changes by model, by the information that I've gotten. But ultimately, I just make sure that in the different vehicle groups that I have, that in each node, I try to be just a little bit under the high end of the Kelley Blue Book fair market range. That's a starting point. Then I'm looking at competitor pricing. So again, in Conquest, I'll pull up Camry, LE, and I'll see exactly at what percent of MSRP the 20 dealers that are closest to me, where are they advertising them? And just like in used cars with vAuto, I'm never trying to be the lowest price. I don't want to be the lowest price, but I don't want to be that far away from it. And but between that and looking at day supply, you just pick a number that feels right. Now, as time goes on, during the month when I'm repricing cars, I'm looking at, you know, am I getting ups on Camrys? Am I selling them at the rate that I think that I should be? So I'm making adjustments all the time based on all of that data. But to start with, it's a percent over invoice.
All right, thank you. This one over to you, Dale. Mark's asking, we know what the competition price is by model, but the manufacturer will not allow us to advertise prices below invoice. If you cannot be market price, is there any advantage to putting a price on the website that is not priced to market? Anything less than invoice is not allowed.
Well, I mean, if you're not allowed to advertise a price below invoice, I understand that, I get that, but all that means is that there's all sorts of opportunity to advertise a car between its invoice and its MSRP, and I would assume that most dealers will abide by that rule, and therefore the range of price discounts will just simply be narrower, but there will still be a range. And yes, I would say that, you know, pricing your vehicles in that range properly, fairly, according to market day supply is a completely rational thing to do, and one that consumers will recognize and appreciate and reward you for doing.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, Jim. Jason's asking, what time frame are you talking about from the casualties to when the showroom felt quote-unquote good?
It probably took about 3 months, and a large part of that was because I really didn't know what I was doing. I mean, I was embarking on this at the time, and I knew of, I think there was one large dealer group nationally that was going down this road, but I tried to find other Toyota dealers that were, wasn't really successful finding anyone to talk to give me advice. So I think the reason it took 3 months is just because we were just learning our way. Otherwise, I think it could have been a matter of, maybe 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay, and Jim, I've got one more from Jason as well. How many Toyota dealerships are within a 20-mile radius?
5. And to speak to a couple of the other questions that were to Dale, I mean, I've got some very competitive dealers around me. I've got one that, it will stack incentives. Right now, I think they're running, Corolla lease at $49 a month. They'll do price leaders that are, massive losses on cars that nobody wants to take. What I found is if we treat people with respect and fairly, and we give them a price, it doesn't have to be the lowest price. Sure, there are going to be some customers that absolutely they've got to win the negotiation, and there's not going to be any profit in them. And then you have to decide whether that's worth it or not. We will try to match a deal anytime that we can, but the vast majority of our customers aren't doing that. 70% are buying at that discounted price without any other discount at all. And I think they're doing that for a reason. They feel good about the experience, and they're not worried about, most of the customers aren't worried about price as their number one objective when they're going to look for a car. They want to be treated properly.
Okay, thank you, Jim. And going to switch over to you, Dale. James is asking, one of the frustrations of Conquest is that for pricing pioneers, the competitive data is almost completely unreliable. I see what they are online for either all or nothing pricing, but it doesn't tell me what the market is genuinely getting for a given vehicle. Can Conquest use relationships with data aggregators like Polk, etc., to begin to address this quality of data issue?
Okay. Well, first, I appreciate that question. And first, it should be understood that the objective of Conquest is not necessarily to tell you or show you what you should sell a car for, but rather how you should price a car in order to drive the maximum amount of people to your showroom. That's the primary objective. And the good news is, and you have to believe that I watch this very closely, and that is that every day that goes by, we count the number of cars on the internet, on common sites that you're all familiar with, that have prices on them other than MSRP or quote-unquote rock bottom price. And every day that number grows. So to be sure, there's a trend out there that is occurring that dealers are waking up on new cars just as they have done on used cars and realize that there's a benefit in putting a legitimate fair price on every car. So every day the sort of the richness and the relevance of the information of prices of new vehicles on the internet improves. And then my final thought is, there's sort of a sexy allure to a lot of companies that purport to tell you what vehicles are actually transacting for. Well, let me tell you, I've spent most of my professional life in the automotive data business, and I want to tell you that if you saw that sausage being made, you wouldn't want to eat it. In fact, you wouldn't even want to get near it, because those companies that purport to tell you where vehicles are actually transacting are actually producing numbers that are inherently flawed for a lot of different reasons. And not the least of the reasons is something we can all appreciate, and that is that, transaction prices in dealerships are often manufactured, to suit a particular purpose of getting a deal done or showing a customer, certain over allowances or a bank. I mean, there's just a myriad of, factory incentives or putting transaction prices together to optimize or minimize taxation, state taxation. I mean, there's the transaction price of a vehicle in an F&I office is a highly engineered value for a lot of different reasons. Also, those companies that purport to report, transaction prices are only able to do it based on a simple VIN decode. And as many of you know, most VINs will only decode at best to year, make, model, and only about 50% of the time to trim, but almost never, engine, transmission, or relevant equipment. So, at best, you're getting a very generic, general, high-level view of a transaction and not functionally reliable. So for a lot of different reasons, both in vAuto provision software and similarly in Conquest, I don't think the transaction price is really the key. I want to give you a pricing perspective that gets maximum number of people to your showroom that will allow you to transact on a fair basis.
Okay, thank you. I have a question here for you, Jim. Jason has asked, since most training models don't teach this technique, how did you develop the training info for your salespeople so your customers knew how to handle the trade value if other dealers were showing higher trade values but their price was higher?
I mean, we took a really simple approach to this, and it was basically that, as opposed to negotiating with the customer, we'd spend our time trying to educate. And it's a lot easier to do that when you're coming from a position where you've already got every car discounted. And if you can start the conversation with the customer that, every car on the lot has a discounted price, or every car on the internet has a discounted price, and that we're proud of those prices and we're willing to stand behind them, and we couldn't possibly put them out there if they weren't based on market conditions. Otherwise, we'd be outsold by our competitors all day long. And it's a very believable premise. And it creates some trust right away because there's no way to shoot the theory down. So whenever we then get into whether somebody else is stacking rebates that don't count or showing inflated trade figures, as we educate the customer to what the reality is, I think it just comes across a lot better. And I'm certainly convinced of that, and what I've seen happen this year tells me that I'm correct.
Okay, thanks so much. Jim, I've got a few more questions here for you. I've got one from Donato. Hold on. What do you do for a daily quick check on the inventory?
The first thing I do when I pull up Conquest is I look to see if the Kelley Blue Book numbers have changed, and I now have any vehicles that are priced above the KBB number. And there are times where that's okay. Toyota Yaris are least expensive Toyota. I'm currently over it because the Kelley Blue Book number is actually under invoice and there's no incentives. I'm just not going to sell cars like that, so I've probably got it $100 over. But that's the first thing I look at. And then the next thing is I like to work in a spreadsheet, so I put the entire inventory into a spreadsheet. I sort it by model, and then I'm just looking for areas where I might be significantly different than the KBB number. Now, back to what Dale was saying, it's not even that I necessarily am worried that the KBB number is accurate as to what's going on in the market. It's just that it gives me a reference point, and it gives me a believable reference point with the customer. So if it says that particular Camry is selling for $21,000 and I'm asking for $20,700, most customers say, that's pretty good. Let's take it.
Okay, next question for you, Jim. Daryl's asking, what is the best practice for a customer who just wants to win, in quotes? We use a similar approach and have found this to be the biggest challenge.
Well, we're not finding that many customers that are like that, and we see them, and we take those on a case-by-case basis. We've already discounted the cars significantly. We are not one price. We still leave ourselves a little bit of room. So our average discount right now from that price is only $200. That doesn't mean that we don't ever discount one far beyond that. But my managers have to bring me a good reason for doing it. Is that a local person that I don't want somebody else's name on the back of their car? Is it a repeat customer? So case by case, we decide whether we want to do that. But we've learned that we can say no, and we've also learned that a lot of, through using this bottom price, we've learned that a lot of the customers that we previously believed had to win at all costs, eventually you're going to have to say no to their demands. And And what we found is we can do that earlier in the process this way, and they still end up saying yes. Whereas before, out of fear, we just kept going. We went to invoice minus holdback on anybody that we couldn't close. And we found that we can close these people at a higher rate without doing the big discount. Sometimes you just have to tell them no early, and they say okay.
All right. Jim, got a question here from Dario. What kind of pay plan do you have? I'm sorry, what kind of pay plan do you have structured? Volume-based?
It's complicated. It's way more complicated than I'd like it to be. When we decided to go down this road, I tried to make as few changes to a pretty convoluted pay plan as I could. It's just, I find it really disruptive to change people's pay, so I don't like to do it. I had to get them focused on selling cars at the discounted price, so we have a $50 spiff on every vehicle sold at the price, and that got the salespeople's attention from day one. But otherwise, it is both volume-based, it is commission-based on the percent of gross. I would like to change that someday. I just don't feel like opening the door and changing their pay plan again, because again, it's always a touchy subject. But it's volume-based, it's commission-based. But the part that we pay the most attention to is what percent do they sell at the discounted price, and if they do have to discount it, how big is that discount on average?
Okay, Jim. Got a question from Nick. How is the JSRP have integrity and a valid fair price if 30% of your sales are still below that value? Does this negate the goal of this pricing process?
I don't think so. I think I would prefer to be one price. I'm just there's that fear in me. I'm still a little bit worried. So I think my goal has become to just slowly get there. So if we're at about the 70% mark this year, I'd like to be 80% in 2015. Maybe I can get it to 90% in 2016, and then maybe I become fully one price. But right now, I'm not that prepared to do it. I don't think we lose integrity when we discount $100 or $200. I think that we would lose some integrity if a lot of our deals had $1,000, $1,100 discounts beyond this price. But at 100 or two, because at no point do we tell people that it's one price and one price only. We say it's a fair price. We document why it's a fair price. But we haven't run into that integrity issue.
Okay, Jim, this next question from Chip. Have your number of internet leads increased since prices are listed on the internet?
Dramatically. We have a BDC. We've added 2 people since we started this at the end of the first quarter, and we may be adding another one. So yes, it's a very substantial increase.
Lori, this is Dale. If I may just add to that, we've been watching this very closely at autotrader.com, and I would say that the adjective that Jim used is very real, dramatic. It's notable how dramatic the improvement of VDP conversions are on new car listings when the vehicles are priced somewhere fairly between MSRP and rock bottom. It's palpable. It's real, and Jim attests to it, and we see it happening everywhere where the vehicles are priced. And that's why I'm so passionate about this. I mean, there's just absolutely no question that the traffic to your showroom will increase markedly if you just do it. And there should also be no doubt, because all of you on this call, or most of you, are provision clients, and it's true on the used car side. So people are people. Behavior is rational for the most part. So you can bet your traffic will increase significantly.
Well, not only that, I mean, the number of internet leads went up dramatically, but also the percentage of those leads we're able to convert went up dramatically. So you get like the double whammy for this.
All right. This question over to you, Dale. John is asking, Dale, on the provision side, we have the ability to print a competitive set for documentation being the new negotiation. On the Conquest side, this function is not available. I have spoken to tech support, but we still do not have that ability. I have to take a screenshot to show our customers where we are priced in relation to the competitor. Dale, will the competitive set print function become available for Conquest?
Yeah, it's really a great question, and we contemplated including a competitive set sort of print function, but as I alluded to earlier, and this is actually a great opportunity. At the moment, the practice of pricing vehicles between MSRP and rock bottom is not as prevalent as on used cars, and consequently, if you printed off a competitive set or attempted to do so on a new car right now, you'd like to see a lot of vehicles listed with a pretty, significant range of pricing. You won't get that pretty picture. So recognizing that that is a tool, documentation does need to replace negotiation. One of the things that we're working on, and we will have very soon, is we have a tool called KBB PAR. And, that stands for Price Advisory Report. So the KBB PAR enhancement that we're working on that we'll be rolling out shortly will allow you to do price sort of relevance presentations to consumers based on how your vehicle is priced relative to KBB fair purchase price. So I think, until the new car market gets really richly saturated with a lot of fair market price vehicles, I think the best way to do, sort of proof of proper pricing is against a well-trusted and recognized benchmark of KBB. So I would say that in the short term, that would be the best solution that we have to offer. Over time, no doubt, we will be able to print out a very meaningful and compelling competitive set for price assurance.
Okay, I have a question here. I think this is going to be good for both Jim and Dale, but I'll start with you, Jim. Robert's asking, how do you combat true car pricing?
The same way that we always did. I mean, when it gets down to the nitty-gritty, you decide whether a deal is worth taking or not on certain customers. We do everything we can to present our story, present our philosophy, and go with that. The true shopper, whether they're shopping on the internet or they've actually gotten into the dealership and they're one of those people that's still going to 5 dealers, there's not much you can do about them. Frankly, I don't worry about them that much. They're becoming a smaller and smaller piece of the consumer base out there. I mean, I think virtually everyone's seen the numbers that, years ago people went to 4-point-something dealers, and now they're going to, I think it's 1.6 currently. So it's a fewer number of people, so frankly, I just don't worry about them as much.
Lori, I'd like to answer that question from the perspective of a media company, that being KellyBlueBook.com, which of course you know that we own, Kelley Blue Book. Kelley Blue Book has a program, and I'm not exactly sure what the name of it is. I think it might be KBB Fair Purchase Price for new vehicles. And if you haven't seen it, you should go to their site and check it out, because what it allows a shopper to do, a consumer to do, is to enter a certain type of vehicle, and then KBB shows the consumer a range of fair price, not a price point, but a range. And then what it does with another click is it will show the shopper all advertising dealers' vehicles that are being listed within that range. So, that is KBB's attempt to walk a very fine line between being relevant and giving consumers what they want, but also doing it in a way that doesn't alienate dealers. And, as everyone understands, TrueCar has really sort of taken a step way outside the bounds, giving consumers perhaps too much of what they want, at least from a dealer's perspective. And, KBB and Autotrader.com are particularly sensitive to giving consumers what they want, but doing it in a way that dealers are comfortable, or as comfortable as possible with. So I think if you haven't seen that KBB fair purchase price on new vehicles, I think you'd be impressed with the way that we thought about doing it so as to be sort of sensible to dealers as well as consumers.
Okay, I think we have time for about 2 more questions. Going to ask this one to you, Jim. Steve is asking, how do you track the amount of discount each sales rep gives?
We have a sales board, so somebody sells a car, salesperson sells a car, they enter on a board the customer's name, stock number. They list the gross profit right then. They list whether or not it was sold at the discounted price, and they list the amount of discount. and that goes into a spreadsheet each day. So we've had it at the end of the month.
Okay, and then our last question here, over to you, Dale. And the question is, I know NADA is a big deal for vAuto. What will you have for dealers at the show?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it is a big deal for us. So we have some really exciting stuff to introduce at NADA next month. I mean, one thing is our second major release of Conquest 2.0 is out, which I think goes a long way to really assisting dealers in getting the right cars on their lot. You know, historically, dealers had to rely on sort of getting them from their factory, you know, sort of in a negotiated way. But Conquest 2.0 shows dealers in plain English exactly what cars with what level of equipment and trim they need, and shows them exactly who in their market has them, such that you can do dealer trades in a proactive or even a reactive way, such that you can build more of the ideal inventory, leverage the strength of the distribution of vehicles in the market, not just from your factory. So that's one very significant introduction, but perhaps our headliner for NADA 2015 is, for a long time, dealers have been asking us to give them an effective tool for subprime, you know, subprime financing. And oh my God, do I have the prize there, because we created a subprime module for vAuto that is unlike anything that you've ever seen. You know, the two big challenges that every dealer understands when it comes to subprime, you know, you sort of think it's a financing challenge. Well, actually, it's more of an inventory challenge. Number one, being able to find the cars that will book out with a minimal amount of effort, this thing just kills it. And then the second thing is, you know, you get a customer in the store, and the challenge of putting, you know, the customer in the right car to get them done is also another challenge. And this thing just makes it simple and ridiculously easy to match, you know, the right customer given their credit profile and their payment and down payment to exactly a list of cars that they actually can get done. So that subprime module is very exciting. And then really quickly, we're also going to introduce a new auto writer. You know, we've heard from a lot of you for a long time that the descriptions are cheesy, too cheesy, and sort of like the more straightforward, you know, formalistic approach of words on the car and relevant equipment. So we have a new auto writer tool comes out that absolutely just, you know, takes it to a whole nother different level. And then, of course, I referenced the KBB Price Advisor Report, that proof document program will have many enhancements. So if you plan on coming to NADA, or even if you don't, please contact us and check out what we have. I think we truly have some really exciting, new, compelling, and useful, relevant stuff coming out.
Okay, thanks. It looks like we are just about at that time. And folks, before we sign off, we'd like to thank each of you for joining us. Trust you found today to be of value, and a special thanks to Jim Blickel and Dale Pollack for the sponsor for today. Most importantly, thank you for joining us. This is Lori Dearman saying have a great rest of the week. Bye for now.